Alrighty, hello everyone. Welcome back to UFC Fight Night Walker versus Zhang and UFC Road to UFC She versus Brazil. We're gonna be covering both fight cards, just the UFC fights. So there's only two fights that are considered to be UFC fights on the She versus Brazil card, but we will be going through the entirety of Walker versus Zhang. Picks and predictions. A lot of crazy stuff has happened in the past hour. If you have kind of been following the recent events on Twitter, there's a lot of mix-ups of the co-main event. I'm going to get to that once we get there, but for now, let's get back to the fights. All right, opening up, this is the co-main event for Road to UFC at flyweight. We got Yum Jargle to Mendembarel taking on Terrence Satorn. Satorn's at minus 145. Tumen Dimbrell is plus 125. And I love both these guys as fighters. I'm glad Satorn is getting his opportunity at the UFC. He's proven on the regional scene he probably is ready for the step up in competition. However, this is a little bit of a tricky stylistic matchup for him. Satorn's a guy that can do it all. Good, decent grappler, decent striker, very good wrestler. Just very well-rounded guy overall, and that could be an issue for Tumen Dembaro because he has shown in his last fight, even his contender series fight, this guy is really aggressive. Sometimes to a fault. This guy will, fall over going for big shots on the feet. On the ground, especially, it's a problem because you see him in these scrambles. He had Carlos Hernandez in a lot of trouble in his last fight and just gave up a ton of positions. Hernandez is a good grappler in his own right, but you saw Tumen Dembaro going for a lot of tenacious submissions, just really submissions that he probably shouldn't have gone for. He probably should have kept that position. But yeah, he was reversed multiple times in very dominant positions, and it could be a problem if he's in these grappling scrambles of Satorn. If he tries to get these submissions, he's probably gonna be giving up his positions because he is like the worst, the least better grappler in this fight. But I am gonna take a shot on him at plus 125 win this fight on the feet by decision. I just think the power is gonna be a big factor in this fight. Satorn taking this fight on short notice. And I think Tumen Dembele is going to have the striking advantage in this fight. Like I said, we saw him hurt Carlos Hernandez bad in that last fight, and I think if he lands on Satorn, he could have an even bigger effect on him. So, I am concerned about the wrestling still, but I think I am going to pick Tumen Dembele as a slight underdog here in this fight to win by decision. All right, road to UFC main event. We got Shi Ming taking on Bruno Brazil. Brazil's sitting at minus 370, and Ming is at plus 295. Obviously, Shi Ming, everyone knows that the viral knockout that she scored her last fight against Fang Xiaokan, just a crazy knockout. The opponent had to carry out on a stretcher after that fight. It was absolutely insane. She was down in that fight. I think that is something that a lot of people miss in that fight. They go and they see the knockout and they see, wow, this girl should be pretty good. Then you watch that fight, and she was kind of getting dominated that fight, kind of getting pushed around. Obviously you see the size. She's pretty small for this weight class, even smaller just in like stature. Like there are women like Jessica Andrade who are 5'1", but she is like, she's thick, she's powerful. That is really not what Shiming is. She's pretty okay all around. Kind of her main avenue is to try to take the fight to the ground, but a lot of the times it is a problem because her size, she's not big enough to hold these girls down. And while Bruno Brazil has been extremely inconsistent in her UFC career, she has shown flashes of greatness. We saw in the Contender Series fight landed her head kick herself. She absolutely picked apart Molly McCann, dominated her. But again, as she has shown these steps up in competition, she's kind of looked flat out there. So there definitely is a chance for Shiming to land something on Brazil. And we have seen Brazil chin in the past, but no, I just think Brazil should be a far better fighter here, both on the ground and on the feet. I think she's gonna have a huge advantage on the feet. Despite the head kick knockout, and I gotta go her to get it done by decision here. But finish is it wouldn't surprise me in this fight. I think minus 370 is a gifted odds on this fight, as mid as Brazil is. All right, we're now moving on to the Walker versus Zhang card. This is the regular UFC card. We'll be filming at around 3 a.m. Eastern, I believe. And opening up, we got a light heavyweight fight. Not a really great fight. We got Uran Satibaldiev taking on Dr. Nurgazai. Kind of not really a UFC caliber fight, but both these guys looking for their first UFC win. One's got to get it. Sadi Baldio sitting at minus 145. Nurgazai is plus 125. And a lot of this line is going to have to do with Nurgazai's debut. And that was an atrocity, to put it frankly, all right? Comes in, gets a really favorable matchup, to be completely honest with you. Misses weight by 5 pounds, I believe, 4 or 5 pounds. I think he weighed in 210, north of that maybe. And obviously he made this after weigh-in, so he made the weight this week, but that debut was just a disaster. He got hurt multiple times. As soon as he actually got the takedown, immediately reversed, put into a Kimura and tapped. So it was a horrible debut, and really just that when you look at fraud check, that probably is right. The front of the textbook is that's a fraud check, right? And he's just not a good fighter, as we have seen. But Uran in and of himself, I didn't really think of him as a UFC fighter coming in on short notice against Budai, up a weight class, might I add. And he looked okay. Obviously Budai isn't very good, but Santi Baldiev did land a pretty heavy right hand at one point in the fight. Hurt Budai very badly. A lot of people thought he won that fight. So obviously the optics for both their last fights are pretty different, but I am gonna go Nurgaj here to win this by decision. I think, you know, looking past the last performance, which is just a tall task because that was a really bad performance, but I do think he is overall the more well-rounded fighter. He can take this to the ground if he wants to, and I think he's just gonna be a little bit sharper on the feet. In my opinion, Santi Baldiev does throw pretty wild, and he definitely could catch Nurgaj. That wouldn't surprise me. You can't trust either of these guys. Honestly, I wouldn't. I mean, if you bet on this, you should probably go donate to the Red Cross Foundation. But as a pick, I do have to slightly Nurgaj here. Again, not confident at all. All right, moving on to Bantamweight, a lot better fight. We got Xiao Long taking on Su Young Yu. Yu is sitting at a very slight favorite, -115. Long is -105, and a lot of late money coming in on Long, and I think that's mainly because a lot of people view you as a one-dimensional grappler. And while that is correct, I think his grappling is going to be Long's downfall because he has shown in his last couple fights that is kind of his weakness is the wrestling. This guy does have pretty good hands, a lot of power for this weight class. We saw that in his last fight, landed a pretty big shot on Kang Lee, but I think the weakness is the wrestling. We saw him struggle to kind of maintain a decent wrestling pace for 3 rounds, right? He's gotten taken out in both of his UFC fights. One by, I mean, obviously Chang Ho Lee is very good, but Kang Lee is not the greatest fighter at this weight class. He was getting taken down by him before he found that finish, but yeah, I think it's just going to be a huge grappling advantage for you. We've seen him do a bunch of crazy stuff in the octagon. This guy's got really high level grappling, and even just the takedown game. There's a lot of very unorthodox takedowns, judo throws, trips, even just conventional wrestling. He does have that in his back pocket. And I think all that movement, and he can maintain it for 3 rounds. Is going to confuse a guy like Long, and I think he's going to be able to avoid the strikes on the feet and get this fight to the ground. So I have him winning by decision. Again, not crazy confident. If he doesn't get the takedowns, he's probably screwed in this fight, but I do think he will get him in this fight and win a decision. All right, moving on to featherweights. Biggest favorite on the card by far, Yija taking on Weston Wilson, sitting at -1,200. Weston Wilson is +700. The only reason these odds are the way they are is because of Weston Wilson and who he is as a fighter, right? Not a very good fighter. Did get his first UFC win last fight against Jekka Saragi, who is just a horrible fighter. The guy has no and Wilson I'm talking about has no striking defense, right? The chin is shaky. Already 36 years old despite only having 3 UFC fights. And I think a lot of people are just kind of like expecting you to just go out there and finish the guy, just knock him out instantly. But this is probably a little bit too wide in my opinion. Yija doesn't have a UFC win yet. Mainly a grappler, actually, which is kind of where Wilson wants to be. The dude's not really comfortable striking, just kind of wants to sit in that, play that guard game, kind of go for leg locks, go for triangles, which he is good at, right? He is very, very long for this division. Knows how to wrap things up in scrambles. So, I could see him presenting some early problems for Yija, but obviously, the line is what it is. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Yija should knock him out in the first or second round once he does kind of stay clear of those submissions. So give me Yija by early knockout. All right, moving on to a middleweight fight. We got Michel Pereira taking on Kyle Dawkins, returning Kyle Dawkins on short notice here. Pereira is sitting at -260. Dawkins is +220. And, despite all the inconsistencies from Pereira recently, coming off of 2 really flat performances. Again, of course, one was against Fluffy, which I can't really discredit. He's very good. But, the Abus Magomedov fight was just a very confusing fight for me. He had a lot of advantages, in my opinion, on the feet, and he just decided not to use those advantages. It was very flat. honestly spent more energy dancing than actually fighting. Just a very not a great performance at all for him, but he is getting a very favorable matchup in a Kyle Dawkins who, you know, coming in second stint with the UFC and has shown consistently throughout his career that his chin is just not good enough to hang in this division. Honestly, if he gets to the ground, past the first round, he could make something happen. But just the chin that he's shown in the UFC, even on the regional scene, was getting hurt bad in his last fight against this regional. I don't even know the dude's name. He was a regional guy. I don't really know him. He was getting hurt bad in that fight. So I think obviously Pereira, we know him has huge power. If he does land something um, of uh, of significance, which I think he will. I just don't think Dawkins' chin can handle it. So give me Pineda by first round knockout. But obviously, you can't really trust the guy until he wins. At this point in his career, and obviously he just hasn't shown that. He might honestly Fluffy might have taken that guy's soul because he looked horrible his last fight. So we got to see. But give me Pineda by knockout here. All right, moving on to lightweight. Should be a good fight. We got Rongju taking on Austin Hubbard. Rongju sitting at minus 250. Austin Hubbard is plus 210. And look, Rongju looked great last fight, and that's why the odds are the way they are. He looked, a level above what he was in the past, right? He obviously worked a lot of that takedown defense against a good wrestler like Cody Steele and was able to just kind of beat him up on the feet. He did take damage in the process, but obviously he showed he was the much better striker. Hurt Cody Steele a handful of times, and I think it's just going to be field day against Austin Hubbard. Right, Hubbard is just a guy who just isn't very good in my opinion. Right, he kind of can do everything at a decent level. Right, he's an okay striker, got a good chin on him. Can wrestle, can have some grappling success, but honestly, if the scorecards were correct, which I mean, I honestly didn't think he beat McCall Figlak. This dude's 0-3 ever since coming back after the Ultimate Fighter. I just don't think the skills are there for Hubbard to win this fight. So giving Raju to win by decision. He's not the most powerful guy in the world, so I don't think he'll be able to get Austin Hubbard out of there. It definitely is possible, but yeah, give me Rongju to win this fight by decision. This is one of my confident picks. Minus 250 seems like a steal to me. All right, moving on. Really good fight coming up at flyweight. We got Charles Johnson. That is, and again, before I even start this breakdown, I do want to mention that I am going to be biased in this pick, right? Charles Johnson is, my personal friend. Again, on Twitter, we follow each other. We talk quite a bit. So obviously there is going to be some bias in here because, he's my friend. So, fair warning to that. If you want to go watch it, more unbiased prediction, there is quite a few decent MMA YouTubers, but we do got Charles Johnson here taking on Loney Kavanaugh, another really good prospect coming into the flyweight division. Seems like it's just getting loaded with good prospects at this rate. And, he's sitting at minus 190, and the comeback on Johnson is plus 165. And like I said, I am biased. I am going to pick Johnson here. But there is, reasoning behind this, right? It's not just a blind pick. This guy is very good Muay Thai striker. And I think a lot of people are underestimating his speed and accuracy on the feet against a guy like Kavanaugh, who had to use the takedowns to beat Felipe Dos Santos, who's not in the UFC anymore. If he didn't get those takedowns, he wasn't going to win that fight. And, that's a problem when you're fighting Johnson, who's going to be a far better striker than Dos Santos. Maybe not as dangerous. Dos Santos is able to threaten those submissions off his back and does have power on the feet, but I think if you're trying to take down Johnson over and over again, you're going to get tired because while his takedown defense does sit at around 60%, he makes you work when you're on top of him. He makes sure he needs to get up. We saw even though he lost to Rafael Estevam, he got taken down almost 11 times, I believe, and constantly was getting. That's why he got taken down 11 times because he kept getting back up and getting back up and getting back up. And I don't think Kavanaugh can maintain a high level wrestling pace for 15 minutes if he's doing that. I think Charles Johnson, may come out with that slow start, but I think he picks it up earlier in this fight. Maybe second round starts picking up that pace into the third round. This guy can really kind of take over this fight. I think it's going to be another vet lesson for Charles Johnson. Going to be another prospect to derail on his part, and I think he can get back in the win column with this. So I got Johnson by decision. Kavanaugh's a tough guy. I don't think Johnson's going to necessarily be able to get him out of there, but I love this spot for Johnson as the underdog once again. All right, featured prelim at lightweight. We got Mahashate taking on Gage Young. Young is sitting at a slight favorite, minus 125. Comeback on Mahashate is plus 105. And these odds are a little bit shaky in my opinion. I think this maybe should be even odds. Honestly, both these guys haven't really shown too much success in their past couple fights in the UFC. Obviously, Young hasn't won in the UFC yet. Had a couple decently close affairs with some good guys. He fought Killing Sal killed on the Contender Series, close fight. Honestly, he kind of faded it along the end, but was showing real heart in that fight. Good takedowns. And against Evan Elder, who's again one of these guys considered a high level prospect in this weight class, he showed he can push a pace for 3 rounds. He held tough in the striking and was able to win a round off him on short notice. So I think that's contrasting with Mahashata, who, despite you know he isn't on a losing streak or anything like that, but this guy's been dropped 5 times in his last 3 fights. And the dude's chin is shaky at best. The takedown defense, while he is pretty tall for this division, it's a little bit not great. His takedown defense, in my opinion, he's just kind of a one-dimensional striker. Does have that one-punch knockout power, but I mean, honestly, the last few fights just have not shown me enough for Mahashata. He is 25, so maybe we can see some more improvements. He came into the UFC at a very young age, so maybe he can see some more improvements. But I do have to go young in this fight. I do think he is the more well-rounded fighter. Should be able to implement that wrestling that he likes to use, and should mix in some dirty boxing as well. Make it a close fight. I got him by decision. Again, like I said, Mahashata's chin is not very good. So, and again, he's fighting guys like Nicholas Mata, who are very good strikers, and Gage Young is certainly not Nicholas Mata, but I do think he can pull off a decision win, maybe a close one here for Gage Young. All right, moving on to the main card, we got Tai. I'm definitely gonna butcher this name. Tai Lake Naraji taking on Kiefer Crosby. Naraji, short notice, UFC step up, sitting at -500. Crosby is +375. And honestly, Naraji could submit this guy he wants, because Crosby, in my opinion, has quite literally the lowest level grappling in the UFC. This guy, as soon as he gets on the ground, this guy has no clue what he's doing. Doesn't look like he's attended a single jiu-jitsu class in his life. This guy is not trying to fight the hands, not trying to fight the hooks, has no idea what he's doing. This guy is mainly a boxer. So, and with that in mind, Naraji is more than a boxer, right? This guy does have takedowns. He does have a wild, fun striking striking style. Fans are gonna fall in love with this guy. I think this guy is super exciting. You watch this guy's road to UFC knockout, and that was absolutely electric. So I think these guys gonna come in, obviously coming in against a really favorable matchup, in my opinion. As long as he doesn't get caught in the pocket or something, I think this should be a pretty straightforward win for Naraji. Again, this is one of my favorite prospects in this division. I'm glad he's getting the step up to the UFC. Hasn't fought in a while, but I don't think it should be a problem. Crosby, just in my opinion, isn't a UFC level guy. So give me Naraji to win this fight by knockout. All right, next up at flyweight, we got Sumadarji taking on Kevin Borjas. Sumadarji is -180. Borjas is +155. And spoiler, I am going to pick Borjas here. And that's because of the striking, activity. In terms of power, I would give that to Sumadarji. The dude, despite being on a pretty bad not a losing streak, he did win his last fight against Mitch Raposa, who has found no success in the UFC or Contender Series or the Ultimate Fighter, but that's a story for another time. But Sumadarji, before that was losing a lot. I mean, again, they're against good guys, and I wouldn't really count Schnell as a good guy, but he was losing quite a few fights in a row. Lost, as I mentioned, lost to Schnell, submitted by Elliott pretty quickly, and then kind of got beat up by Charles Johnson in that fight. He did show some good takedown defense in that fight, but he's not really going to need it in this fight. Borjas is, a pure striker, and I think he's going to have problems with him. He does have that reach advantage, but Sumadarji is, liable to get hit. Kind of starts off a little bit slow on the feet, and Borjas, on the other hand, he is a fast starter. His durability has kind of been put into question sometimes, but I think he can come out hot in this fight. Kind of work the legs of Sumadarji, long legs. I think you can work those early, and then go up to the head as this fight progresses. And I think that early start from Borjas is really gonna put it on Sumadarji, who has shown the durability isn't great on his side. So give me Borjas to win this fight by decision. A finish on either side wouldn't surprise me. This is one of the more volatile flyweight fights that you can make. All right, moving on to heavyweight feature fight. We got Sergey Pavlovich taking on Waldo Cortez Acosta. Pavlovich is -250. Comeback on Cortez Acosta is +210. And listen, you obviously cannot trust Pavlovich at this point in his career, right? Coming against Aspinall with even odds in that fight, he got absolutely smoked, and just hasn't really looked the same since then, right? He came in against Volkov and just didn't really know what to do in that fight. Just could never get his boxing going, which is, mainly what he is. He is a boxer. Obviously, the reach advantage, very powerful boxer, but, he just hasn't shown the power. He had to rely on, grappling and wrestling to take down Biggie Boy in his last fight, who isn't even on the roster at this point. So it's a very bleak situation for Pavlovich. Obviously, he's still number three, so a couple wins, he gets him right back in the title picture. But as a pick, I have to pick him because Cortez Acosta, hasn't really shown too much power in my opinion to kind of hang with these higher level heavyweights. The cardio also I don't love. In the Spivak fight, he was able to kind of keep up the volume for 3 rounds, but it was clear that the pop on his shots were all gone. The movement wasn't really there. Maybe if Sergey doesn't come out leg kicking, Cortez can have quite a bit of success early on in this fight. But I just think Pavlovich, obviously I really can't trust him because I don't really know what form of him is going to show up. Is it going to be the killer that was finishing all these high level heavyweights, or is it going to be the guy that the shell of himself that just is really gun shy on the feet and just kind of goes for takedowns when he's feeling uncomfortable? So, obviously I think he can have success in both departments. The pick is going to be Pavlovich to win by knockout, but I can't you can't put money on him minus 250. You can't. It's ridiculous. So Pavlovich it is, but can't trust him until he wins again. All right, next fight. And this is the craziest I was talking about. It's gonna be at a catch weight of 153. Ortega versus Sterling. I'm not sure if this is 3 or 5 rounds. At this point, I'm assuming it's still 5 rounds because that is what it was originally scheduled for, and there was just the weight to be concerned about. So I assume this fight is going to go forward at 5 rounds. There could be an update by the time this video drops. So, if there is, just kind of comment it down below, or I might see it on Twitter or something. But this fight was in all sorts of trouble just today, honestly, at weigh-ins. There's reports of Ortega like collapsing during weigh-ins, fainting, having to go to the hospital. And the fight was, originally officially called off by you know, reputable sources at the UFC. Marcel Dorf, all those guys were confirming, okay, this fight's off. This fight's not going to happen. Then about 20 minutes ago, the UFC says, "Oh wait, there is going to be a fight." There's fighters from this institute saying that Ortega is weighing in. This fight is going on at 153 pounds, and it's just like I don't know really what to trust at this point because some reports saying Ortega was in the hospital, which it definitely should be called off if he was in the hospital. Some saying he just had trouble, cutting weight. Either way, the fight is going to still go on. We got Ortega versus Sterling. Sterling, pretty big favorite here, minus 280. Could change a lot as the day progresses. We could see Sterling balloon up to an even bigger favorite, but Ortega is plus 240 here. And craziness aside, we take that and throw it out the window, right? This is pretty much a grappler versus grappler fight. And, the difference in here, I was originally going to pick Ortega before the whole craziness. But, after kind of looking at it and looking at how he looked on the scales, if you do find a picture of him on the scales, it did not look good. He looked like he saw the beaches of Normandy. He was not good. And he looked like a skeleton. So, that says a lot. He's had trouble making the weight his past couple fights. He had the whole Diego Lopez situation. I'm pretty sure everyone knows that. But obviously just shows that the dude has to move to lightweight. I don't know what he's doing to cut weight, where he's going wrong, because it seems like the dude isn't even that, tremendous for this weight class. Just, I don't know. I guess he just, old age, the water drain's probably catching up to him. But, as a pick, I am going to switch over to Sterling for this. And honestly, I probably should have picked him to begin with. The wrestling advantage is going to be, a big factor in this fight. Obviously, early on at bantamweight, people were criticizing Sterling, low takedown accuracy. The dude does have high level wrestling, and I think he does, have the jiu-jitsu to kind of hang with Ortega in this fight. And I think as the fight goes on, if it is 5 rounds, Ortega's cardio is going to be a major concern for me. Obviously Sterling might have trouble getting the takedowns in the first couple, rounds because maybe the weight advantage, hurts him a little bit, I guess the weight being at 153 is going to hurt him a little bit, but as the fight goes on, Ortega should slow down pretty massively, and I think Sterling can take advantage of that, and maybe even find a finish late. But I do think he gets it done by decision here. Obviously, not a great look for Ortega for this to happen. Got to move up to lightweight. Okay, there we go. Light heavyweight main event. We got Johnny Walker taking on Zhang Minyang. Zhang Minyang is minus 330. Johnny Walker is sitting at plus 270. And this is as simple as it gets, right? It's a fight. It's going to end the first round, right? With both these guys, pretty lackluster striking defense. But the difference is, obviously the chin, much better for Minyang. Walker just, It's a meme at this point. The dude got no chin, can't take a punch. And it's true, and against Min Yang, that's going to be a problem. The dude has insane power. And, one punch on the chin of Johnny Walker, and he probably goes out. So I'm not going to keep this longer than it should be. Picking Min Yang by first round knockout. I think, first round finish, just straight up fight ends of the first round is free money, in my opinion, because it's either going to be Walker, fighting wild. And if he does fight wild instead of, this kind of timid, kickboxer that SPG Ireland has turned him into, I think he definitely could win this fight. Min Yang has shown in the past and far back performances, he's shown weakness in his striking defense, but I think he's cleaned most of that up since coming to the UFC, since training for these big fights. And I just got to pick him here. It's just, you can't pick Johnny Walker at this point in his career. The chin's too bad. That's the reason I picked Uzdemir to beat him, and he knocked him out cold. And I'm going to pick Zhang Min Yang to beat him, and he's going to knock him out cold. So until he wins, I can't pick him. So I got to pick Min Yang to win this fight by a first round knockout. Pretty clear cut pick, but that is, the card. I'm glad that Ortega Sterling's still on. Should be a fun fight, even with the whole weight debacle. But yeah, props to Sterling too for still taking that fight. A lot of people would have said no, I'm not going up the weight class, but he does take it. He knows probably he doesn't have many more years left, so he's trying to get this ranking up. But big respect to him. But that is the end of the breakdown. Obviously, Road to UFC is going to be streaming tomorrow morning. So if you're catching this after, then you just skip past that. But thank you guys so much for watching. Try to get this out again. I say it every week, but I'm gonna try to get it out sooner. Hopefully starting next week, or I guess the week after, since there is a 1 week break. But you might see a different video from me next week. Maybe breaking down these Contender Series prospects that are showing up. Really fun episodes coming up in the few couple weeks. You follow my Twitter account. You'll see me post predictions on that the day before fights. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend.